So the Power of the Dog is a unique feature. Andy saw this a few weeks ago, and he encouraged me to kind of check it out. I think we briefly talked about it on the show. I think at one point you very briefly said you liked it. But we had kind of a floating spot open for this week to watch after Matrix. This was available. Andy had already seen it, and he'd contracted a deadly disease. So I'm glad he's feeling better. Virus, I guess. I'm glad you're feeling better and you're okay. And I didn't want you to have to watch something else. So I figured Power of the Dog would be a great feature to watch. And it has been. Power of the Dog is about the Burbank family, George and Phil Burbank, two very wealthy ranch owners in Montana in 1925 is the year. George Burbank is played by, the guy that looks like Philip Seymour Hoffman. What's his name?
Jesse Plemons.
Jesse Plemons, thank you. Who is a bit of a business side of the ranch, huh? He's kind of chubby. He's a bit of a soft boy, but he handles the money. That's his thing, and kind of the mansion. Phil, his brother, played by Benedict Cumberbatch, is the rancher side. This man is all cowboy, right? Rubs mud on himself and takes a bath in the river. Doesn't care, right? He's 110% cowboy. George Burbank is lonely and looking for love, and he marries a local inn owner, played by Kirsten Dunst. Her and her son move into the Burbank house, and Phil Burbank, the rough and tough rancher, doesn't take a shine to them as much as he'd like. But living out there, all of them together, their family develops in some unique ways, and their relationship, it sometimes turns charming and other times insidious. The movie is on Netflix. It is 2 hours long, and it's a unique feature, and I'm excited to talk about it with Andy. Andy, what did you think of The Power of the Dog?
So I had heard really good things about this, and I started it, and it moves really slow. And I stopped it after like the first act. It was about the first half hour or so, because it was really boring. It goes really slow, and it also is set up very stereotypically. You know, you have Benedict Cumberbatch, who is kind of this rough and tough cowboy, doesn't like anyone. You have the introduction of Rose and her son as well. It's very effeminate. And so it looks like it's going to be a certain type of movie. And so like I actually stopped it at that point and didn't come back to it. And then someone else told me that they'd seen there, like, you have to finish it. You like, it gets so good. So I was like, okay. So I gave it another shot and continued on. And I really grew to like it. It is very challenging to get through. But I think it has a lot going on. It has good performances, and it's not what you think it's going to be. Because at first it looks like a very stereotypical story and cowboy setting. And then it looks like it's going to maybe do a postmodern thing, something like maybe Brokeback Mountain. And then it kind of turns into something different even from that. So I really ended up enjoying it. And I think it's a really like complex film, and that it just has a lot going on, but it's definitely very slow paced.
Yeah. This is definitely one of those like slow-paced Oscar contender movies. This is not any kind of like exciting action feature starring Doctor Strange's own Benedict Cumberbatch. This is not like an exciting indie revival for Kirsten Dunst. Like, it's much quieter. It's much slower. But I've been seeing it show up on top 10 lists, right? It's that time of year. And I've seen a lot of critics and reviewers say, hey, this movie's really something special. It showed up on Obama's like films of 2021 list. Like, he was saying Power of the Dog is a film worth watching. So when Andy said the first hour is agonizingly slow, the second hour is really good, naturally I was curious. And that's a relatively apt description of what's happening. Really, the whole movie is slow, and the whole movie is kind of methodically paced, and it's telling a story that's very subtle. It's based on a book written by Thomas Savage, and it's so subtle at parts I felt like I had to get on Wikipedia and be like, what is happening in this film? But there's a lot there. There's a lot going on, and ultimately, like, this isn't so much like any kind of action Western. It's almost hardly a drama Western. Like, at times it's almost a thriller. It's got this really fascinating soundtrack that I think is worth talking about.
By Johnny Greenwood.
Can you weigh in on that at all? I mean,
yeah.
The
soundtrack is by Johnny Greenwood, who famously did the soundtrack for There Will Be Blood. and other big films. And he has a very unique approach to making soundtracks. Like, it's not like John Williams where you have themes and melodies. It's very modern, very what we would call 20th century. A lot of just like, it's almost like like structured noise to kind of accompany what's happening, because it's a lot about like feeling and, like you said, tension, thrilling, thrills.
And lots of droning kind of tones, but on period appropriate instruments. So violins and like a fiddle. And at times looking at these like big wide landscape shots out in Montana, it feels almost like you're watching like The Shining. Like you have these creepy overtones just like constantly creeping over the film. And the Burbanks seem like relatively, normal Montana guys. They're wealthy, like they have a nice family. Their parents come and visit at one point. But like there's just this air of like, what's the term? Doom? For like a lot of what's going on. Yeah, like you feel
you're like waiting
Burbank,
for the
Yes, yeah. Like Benedict Cumberbatch's character, Phil Burbank, is like just like brutally beguiling, and like you don't really know what's going on with him, and he constantly looks like he's about to pop off, and he's getting drunk, and he says mean stuff, and like he's very clearly like this like cut from the clay man, right? Like he is just this rough and tumble kind of guy, not what you'd expect from Benedict Cumberbatch. I'm sure that's why he was attracted to the role. And like you're just kind of waiting for him to flip out on somebody, right? Like at some point you're like he's gonna freak out, or like he's gonna throw a punch at his brother. And that really creates this air of suspense over a lot of the film, because all of these characters just kind of tiptoe around him. Like nobody really knows how to deal with the guy. And when George finally gets married to Kirsten Dunst and she comes into the home, like Phil's not kind, and it's weird. And like there's a visible on-screen tension between him and other characters, and it's present throughout most of the film, and it makes it feel like a bit of a thriller. Like it really does. You're a bit like, what's going to happen here? Where's this going to go? But it's subtle, and most audiences would probably just get bored. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's terrible to everyone. He he calls his brother Fatso. He's super mean to Kirsten Dunst, and he just straight tells like his brother, he was like, she's just here to rob us. She's just like a grifter. Like congratulations on your wife who's gonna rob, is here to take all your money. He's really mean to the son, who's like, is a very effeminate. And I think he's supposed to kind of, I think kind of be a gay character, or like you're supposed to just like question, And so you think he is also very mean to, and you think he's gonna like flip out on him. And again, it set up a lot of things that you've seen stereotypically happen in lots of movies, but it goes in very, very different directions.
Right. Like you don't have your characters, you think of a Western film, you expect a lot of, kind of tropes, right? You're going to have your characters galloping on horses over big landscapes, probably going on some kind of journey, or there's some kind of hero that's ridden to town that's going to save the townsfolk from Black Bart and his gang of ruthless thugs, whatever. This has none of those things. It's pretty much one setting. There are a few other buildings featured, like Rose's Inn, they visit, and the ranch and kind of the manor on the ranch and the barn, but for the most part, like there's no journey. Like we're not going anywhere. And in fact, the journey is coming to us. Like the conflict is coming to the house, and watching these characters just kind of subtly navigate that while also trying to hold up this kind of prim and proper expectation of a modern society that's expected to come in the new West that Phil obviously wants no part of. Creates some tension on screen. Phil is not invited to dinner at one point because he won't wash up, and he refuses, won't do it. I'm not going to be that way. He fears this kind of modernity, and Rose's son, Peter, who's kind of a unique kid. He wants to be a doctor. He kind of, is a part of that. He comes into the house and he wants to talk about science and dissect a rabbit, and Phil's like, I don't want anything to do with these people, like you keep waiting for something to happen. And it makes for a very satisfying third act.
Yeah. Yes, it absolutely does. Like you said, it sets up a very, like you said, a trope, a stereotypical, the way you've seen a ton of movies set up, and it goes in very different directions. Eventually, Phil, Benedict Cumberbatch's character, actually kind of begins to take Peter under his wing a little bit. It kind of turns like you don't really expect their relationship to become what it does. And there's also Kirsten Dunst kind of she gets stressed out and she starts drinking, and it kind of gets out of control for the other half of the movie.
Definitely. It definitely gets out of control.
But eventually it really becomes more about Phil and Peter, but not in a Brokeback Mountain kind of way, which is what I thought this was going to go to. But it's completely not that. It's difficult. It's just difficult to kind of say without saying.
Yeah, it's a unique feature that kind of plays with your expectations. Like you kind of expect, oh, it's going to be, some kind of Western featuring Benedict Cumberbatch. He looks like a messy, filthy man in this movie, which he is, by the way, constantly covered in sweat and grime. My God. It's called The Power of the Dog. It's going to be aggressive, right? Something's going to happen in here that's like aggressive. Not really. No, all that aggression is under the surface, and like that subtlety, like those small things, the look that one character throws another character across the room without saying a word, like that's the stuff that I think critics really fall for. That's the stuff that people really like in this industry, that watch a lot of movies. Those subtleties like are exploratory, and they invite something new. They invite the audience to participate in their own way and perceive things, that you may read as one thing and somebody else reads as another. It makes the movie exciting, makes it fun to talk about, but it also makes it a challenge to recommend to mainstream audiences, because a lot of people aren't going for that, right? Like they don't want subtlety. They want Vin Diesel to blow stuff up. They want Spider-Man to swing in and save the day. Like that's the good stuff,
I wanted to talk about another character we haven't mentioned, kind of looming person called Bronco Henry.
Yeah,
who is a deceased person who is referenced and apparently was instrumental in teaching Phil. What's the brother's name? Phil and George. George to instrumental. They knew him when they were young, when they were first ranch hands, and was instrumental in them becoming cowboys, ranchers, and being successful. And it's kind of a character that they constantly talk about in like mythical status. Like the other ranch hands are like, did Bronco Henry really do this? Did he really,
absolutely
that kind of thing. And that also has a very looming presence over the entire film. It's a very important thing.
Yeah, even down to his wonderful name, right? Bronco Henry. He's not like a Phil or a George. He's a legend of something. They talk about him like he's a Greek god, right? Like, and Bronco Henry represents like number one an intimate relationship as a tutor and a mentor for Phil Burbank, right? This angry, kind of twisted, sort of frustrated man, but also like represents this older ideal of the Old West, right? Like when cowboys roamed the earth, and Bronco Henry knew how to do everything, man. He was a legend. He could kill a snake just by looking at him. Like that stuff is gone, right? That's gone by the old wayside now. And it's 1925, man. Like science is on its way in. Kid wants to be a doctor. Like things are up in the air. It's not that way anymore. And like there's a visible frustration coming from like Phil's very being, right? Like his character, that like he's being pushed outside and he's left outside with the cattle, right? He's not good enough for people in suits in their modern society. And it's exciting. Like that creates tension in a unique way. Like that makes him an interesting, multifaceted character. That stuff's great. Like that pops. That's stuff in the film that really works.
Absolutely.
I think that's possible because of good acting, right? Benedict Cumberbatch is really fun in this movie. He's a far cry from his Doctor Strange, and I think that's a good thing. I was a little worried the accent was going to be like exactly the same, but now it gives a little bit of a twist. Kirsten Dunst is pretty good in this movie. I have not seen her in anything in a while.
She kind of gets sidelined, unfortunately, about halfway through. We kind of don't see from her very much.
Yes. Additionally, Jesse Plemons' character, I like Jesse Plemons just fine, but he also is missing for like a chunk of this film.
Yeah,
his character's sent off on a work trip. Well. Yeah, so he's just kind of not around. Kodi Smit-McPhee. Kodi McPhee Smith?
Yeah.
His name?
Smit-McPhee.
Smit-McPhee. Yes. The kid from The Road, the Cormac McCarthy film based on the Cormac McCarthy book. He is the son Peter in this movie. He's definitely awkward, and he's like tall and lanky and weird, but he also bears, in my opinion, an odd and unique resemblance to Phil, to Benedict Cumberbatch, and like in a way that brings their characters kind of close together. They're both kind of tall and lean and dark hair and eyes set just a little too wide apart. And lastly, who's the other individual in this film that I wanted to talk about? Who is this person? Oh gosh, hold on. Stand by. Oh God, I don't know. Is anybody... the housemaid, Thomasin McKenzie, shows up for like one scene
how could
out
we
of
forget?
nowhere.
Yeah, Thomasin McKenzie is in this briefly.
Yeah, star of Edgar Wright's Last Night in Soho is a maid in like one scene. I think she's in it otherwise, but like the camera's only on her face like once. Just a weird. I don't know if she was just on set that day. Like I don't know if she's friends with the director. I don't even see her listed in the IMDb credits. Oh, she's down there. Yeah, Lola is her name. That's a surprise. So keep an eye out for her if you see this film. Andy, any thoughts on performances?
Really solid performance from Benedict Cumberbatch, particularly. There's a lot of Oscar talk about him. Same thing with Kodi Smit-McPhee. Like we said, we don't see Jesse Plemons and Kirsten Dunst for very long in the film, where they kind of get sidelined about halfway through. So it's really about those two characters. But he's great, and he's got a little bit of an accent. And remember, he's a British actor, so he's got a little bit of a Western accent, and he's mean, man. At the beginning, he's a mean person.
Yeah, he really is. Like he leans into it. He's a bit of he's not quite a method actor, but he leans in on his performances. And this one, he for sure like is going for it. I'm glad it makes the film better, makes it fun to watch. Andy, you ready for recommendations? I think I'm there. Andy, would you recommend The Power of the Dog?
I would, with caveats for fans of bold cinema. So this is a great film. It's getting a lot of Oscar buzz and Oscar talk. It is a challenge to get through. It's long. It's a solid 2 hours, and it is very, very slow. So you have to be patient with it. Take breaks if you need to, but it's definitely worth getting through. It's on Netflix. You don't have to pay admission to the theater to admission. But I would encourage everyone to get through it if they can, because it's a lot of. It reminds me of Phantom Thread, which I hated Phantom Thread, but I'm glad I saw it because I was glad to be able to talk about it, because it is like a deep and complex film. It's like having to read the classic like the Odyssey or something like that. Like it's homework. It's eating your vegetables, but you'll be glad you did it on the other side.
Sure. I've got to watch Phantom Thread at some point. That movie's on so many top 10 lists, and you did not like it. I gotta see what that's about.
It's a bit like this, honestly.
Yeah, I haven't seen the film, but I would imagine it's a bit like this. It is bold cinema. Like if you're not interested in basically sitting for a 2-hour art house feature where like nobody talks for 10 minutes and you get long shots of landscapes and people look somber, probably not the film for you. But I think this movie's kind of cool. Like I think there's something kind of unique here. It's a really solid performance from Cumberbatch that makes it work. I can see why it's on top 10 list. If you're curious, if you listen to this and you want to know more, go check out The Power of the Dog. It's on Netflix. You can watch it. Not too big of a deal. Not the easiest to digest, and a slow first hour, but a surprisingly thoughtful feature by the end of it. Like a uniquely thoughtful experience. And I'd recommend